Hey South Point, some of the things we want to do while we can't meet in person is to try and have some conversation along the way. And so I've invited Chris and Jay. We just seen the message, and so we want to have a conversation about what we've just heard. And hopefully you can join in the conversation. You can leave a comment below or interact with us, send us some messages. We'd love to know what you thought about this as well. We're in the middle of a series called Bystander, where we're tracking along with John as he experiences Jesus. And it really is an amazing series, and a lot of new stuff coming out of that. So I'm going to put a 15-minute timer on my watch to make sure that we do not go over time. And we're going to start the discussion. So here we go. So guys, we've just watched part 4 of Bystander. What was some things that really stood out for you during the message?
You're welcome to go first.
I didn't have my brain turned on for the message.
Well, that's not a good thing.
Well, that's not for this. I mean, like, to immediately answer a question that you asked me.
But you're a processor. You need to think through all of that stuff beforehand.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a processor.
Yeah.
So,
Jay, what did you write down? I saw you were taking a lot of notes.
Yeah, I took a bunch of notes, and something that stood out for me was that in the miracle or the sign that we spoke about in this message, Jesus feeding the 5,000, we kind of found out that people focused more on the miracle itself, the sign itself, and not what it pointed to, which is to Jesus. And that kind of, I was able to draw some parallel lines with my life. And being a Christian, when I first became a Christian, I was more focused on what Jesus could do for me and not what I could do for him and who he is just as our God. So that was very interesting for me.
Yeah. I find it interesting as well, like Andy has this way of just bringing up things that we don't necessarily think about. And he talked about the 5,000, that's a very specific number. Yeah. And linking that to the, what a Roman legion would be. Like that I never made that connection, that there was something significant to the fact that, John was pointing out that there were 5,000 men in that thing.
Yeah, nor did I think that this could have been the army that could have taken Rome down if Jesus had been clever enough. Well, if that was his will, he could have taken these men and marched all the way down to Jerusalem, and by the time they got there had an army big enough to take over Rome, which is what everyone thought was like the end result. That's what they thought that they wanted. But instead Jesus was like, no, go get on a boat, do the opposite.
I think I wrote down the point of, Jesus had so many things that, he was still going to pursue his way. I think as humans, we all have our own way, and we want to pursue our own way, especially like, Jesus, you're going to do this thing for me. Like, I'm going to pray that you're going to do this thing for me. And Jesus was like, he knew those people. Like, I'd never probably recognized the fact that he knew their hearts and the fact that that's what they wanted to do. They were going to take, they were going to take Rome by force. That was what they had the opportunity to do, really. But I never put that together, that was a strategic moment by Jesus to say, no, that's what's going to happen. Let's get on a boat and get out of here. Let's retract quickly so that my way is still happening.
Andy keeps constantly using this word agenda in all of his, what are we, week 4? So in all the weeks before, talks about John having an agenda, and I think John learned agenda from Jesus, because Jesus's agenda was the Father's agenda, which was often required a humility from the people that were learning or being taught by Jesus or receiving a miracle from Jesus. And so the agenda, like to not take the army to Jerusalem, his agenda was to save the world, not just take one city. And teaching the disciples humility through the practice of his agenda rather than like someone else's agenda was a big thing, like a big thing to kind of consider.
Yeah. Going on that, Andy started his message by saying that it's impossible to have an authentic and intimate relationship with someone that you want something from. And I think often as Christians, we look at our relationship with Jesus as an agenda thing. We want stuff from him. And to wrap up his message, Andy said that we must change our frame of mind and thinking to your will, not my will. Your agenda, not my agenda. And that stood out to me.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever been in a relationship with someone who has an agenda. I mean, like most of us, if we've ever worked a day in our lives, there's someone who has an agenda, right? But have you ever been in a relationship with someone who you feel like there's specifically been an agenda? Like someone is pursuing a relationship with you because they have an agenda in mind?
Yeah, it feels icky. It's like picking up Benjamin, like a grape that's been in Benjamin's mouth off the floor. It's like, it just feels like there's something wrong here. Yeah. I don't know what went wrong here, but something's icky, something's wrong. Yeah, you can tell right away.
Yeah. I think we do that as well. I think we pursue people sometimes because we have an agenda in mind. You know, I think sometimes in business as well, we would find an avenue and push or pursue that because we want to move in that direction. We want something from that person when, you know, I mean, we're talking about this reframing of the mindset as well, to be able to say, well, sometimes, yeah, it's pursuing because you want something, but, you know, sometimes it can be a business relationship where we both benefit from what's happening as opposed to just a single benefit. That it really is ultimately a mutually beneficial relationship. How would you describe an authentic relationship? Like, Annie used that word at the beginning and the end, authentic relationship. How would you describe that kind of relationship?
I would call an authentic relationship an honest relationship. So it's less about, I do this, this, and this, and therefore my relationship is authentic. And it's more about, like when I think about having authentic relationships with friends or my wife, it's like if I bring my honest self to her or to them, then that relationship is authentic because it's real. It's like I'm dropping my agenda, I'm dropping my expectations, I'm dropping everything, and I'm just bringing exactly what it is, whether it's, can we have eggs for dinner instead of this, or whether it's like something very deep and meaningful that I want to get out. And that, you know, so like sometimes a quiet time for me may just be like sitting with the Bible open and being like, okay, God, I have no idea what to read or say or do. I guess I'm just here. So I'm going to wait on you. I think like Jesus wants our authenticity. I think honesty is more authentic than anything else.
Jay, what do you think? You're a little younger than us, so how would you describe an authentic relationship?
I think an authentic relationship for me would be where the other person's focus is and where my focus is. If my focus is on myself, that person won't feel valued, and they'll quickly figure that out. And I think the advantage of being younger, and I don't know if it's necessarily an advantage, but our attention spans are quite short. So if something doesn't grip us, whether it's a TV show or a sports match or a relationship, a friendship, we're very quickly aware of that. So for me, if I know someone's focus isn't on me as their friend, I'm going to pick that up very quickly. So it's all about where the focus is and how transparent you are about that. So that's what an authentic relationship for me would be.
Yeah, Annie talked about that the Apple salesperson who, and it's just kind of going on from this. One of the fascinating things that I think is really a life lesson that he kind of meant. He drops that in, but I mean, it's actually something you can take away from that. Is when you meet an important person, is asking questions. And like, I think a lot of people, when it comes to mentorship or discipleship, like if you're pursuing someone to really mentor you, I think often we forget that it's about us bringing a question to the person who's more important than us, or the person who is, you know, that we're seeking mentorship from. It's about actually coming prepared and having questions and you know, making sure that we can learn whatever we can from that person. It's not asking them to steer the conversation. Yes, yeah. It's about coming prepared for questions.
And it's the same with our relationship with Jesus. When we sit down to have like a prayer time, we often like pray like, okay, God, can you give me this? Can you do this? Can you do this miracle? And then we have like an expectation or an agenda that's going to happen soon. And then we get mad at God, or we're like, well, why didn't God give me that? Why didn't God give me, you know, these things? And it's that same thing of like, bring questions to God because He's more important to you. Like, let God mentor you. Like, bring questions to Him. Yeah. Rather than just like, God, I expect you to do this because I prayed for it. So why haven't you done it? I mean, you died on the cross, so surely you can like fix my broken washing machine or whatever is, you know, going on in life or marriage or whatever. But it's like instead it's that humbling, which gets into Andy's last point on consumerism. Like, don't be a consumer. Don't be somebody that's just, what can I get? What can you give me? But rather, like, even in that authenticity of a quiet time, just coming to God and saying, I don't know, like, I don't know what to ask or what to do, but Lord, you're amazing. You're God. Can you just give me a word? Can you tell me? Can you help me? You know, like, it's about like opening your heart and receiving something from God instead of having like an agenda for it.
Yeah.
But I think so many of us as human, we fall into that trap of pursuing Jesus for that thing. And it's remembering, I think your thing of saying like, hey, well, you actually got to ask questions. Like it's a really good way because you're exploring. Like that's what you're really doing. You're then thinking, okay, well, how can I move in a direction? Okay, I want this thing. I'm praying for this thing. But at the end of the day, it's God's will. Like that's gonna, overpower everything that's going on in my life. But how do I work through that? How do I pursue that? When you go to see a counselor, and the counselor really asks you probing questions, right? It's the same way. It's been able to explore, why is this not happening in my life? Well, there may be a good reason. Like, well, I don't know what that is, but we've got to explore that along the way as well. One of the things that is interesting, and Andy talks about this agenda the whole way through his series so far. He talks about this idea that John ends up leaving a lot of details. Like we talked about the 5,000 now, but he also mentions that there are 12 baskets left over. Like I'd never thought about that, the fact that, God had given the people of Israel the manna, but now this was a God showing abundance and showing love, extra. Which was, I think, something that the Jewish people missed very quickly. No offense to them, but I think that was something that is clear to John. But if you look at the Gospel of John so far, we've covered 4 signs. What in this story specifically, what do you think are some of those numbers, some of those details that John specifically put in because he was hoping that people would believe based on the signs that he was telling?
Yeah, I think that it was probably, obviously, the 5,000 people, being fed, and having 12 baskets left over, like, it's pretty remarkable. Like, I wonder what they did with those 12, baskets. So I think that was like a really, like a cool detail for me. The details that stick out to me that make this feel like it's more real is like the humanism of Jesus. Like he retreated. Like I'm an introvert, and so I get it. Like Jesus was like I'm gonna go to the mountain by myself. Like I'm gonna go by myself. So like you see, like a real. Because if I was gonna write like a make-believe story, I'd put details in, but then I would also make Jesus like this superhero that like floated and flew and like did all this crazy stuff. But Jesus was like, no, I'm tired. I'm going to the north of Jerusalem. Yeah. Like, no, I'm going to go to the top of this mountain by myself. Like I think those things would have only been known by somebody who was there, like watching Jesus do it or being told to get on the boat or, that sort of thing. So that stuck out a lot to me.
Yeah.
I think also John's talking about the Passover. He's talking about all these very specific things, and Annie has a great way of being able to say, well, the Jewish people knew what happened at Passover. They knew, the 5,000 men. All these signs that we don't just read in the Bible, we just glance over. And he has a way of bringing those things out to be like, oh, that he's telling them because that's a foreshadowing of something that's going to happen. Like, this is what the people wanted, but it's not actually going to happen because Jesus has a different agenda. And bringing that back to those things every single time, I think is something fantastic that Andy certainly, I was thinking like Andy humanizes Jesus because I think we do put him on a pedestal and it's like this, yes he is, but he's kind of the superhero that's going to fly everywhere, like, oh, he's there, when in actual fact he's still walking around like a human.
He walked 100 miles north of Jerusalem to get away from people. I get that.
You need your isolation, right? Yeah, we'll understand that. I wanted to we like literally a couple minutes left. I want to think, we've all faced difficult things in our lives and try to make decisions along the way. What do you think are some thoughts and things that have helped you move in a direction that's pursuing Jesus as opposed to pursuing what you want?
Well, I think I can identify with everybody and say that Jesus never gives me everything that I ask for. And, which is like a real thing, because people pursue Jesus and we think that we're going to get, like, okay, God, I'm pursuing you, so I'm going to get something. And so many times we come to God and ask for things, and we don't get it. But then every time I look back on my life, like, I see that God's been guiding me through no's more than He guides me through yeses. And the way that He guides me through those no's leads me to a better place than the yeses that I wanted would have led me to. And so it's created kind of like a humility of like, well, okay, God, if you're closing this door, then like, I'm excited to see the next door that opens.
Yeah. I think for me, Andy spoke about it in the beginning, but he spoke about this peace that surpasses all understanding. Yeah. And I think especially right now in South Africa with COVID-19, there's so many things we don't understand. But through that peace, we're able to go into situations, deal with things that we don't understand, and still have that peace of God, knowing that He is fighting on our behalf. He's pulling the strings behind. And we get to just serve an amazing God that does that for us. And that gives me confidence in our situation.
Wrap up our conversation. And he says at the end there, he says, hey, we shouldn't be consumers, we should be followers. Yeah. And one of the things that we're called to do as followers is really to love. That's the 15 minutes right there. But really called to love people the way that God loved us. How do you think right now in South Africa with COVID-19, everything's going on, how do you think we as a community, as people, can show love to people around us?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we can do is take every opportunity that we have to just to recognize, just as we saw the humanness of Jesus in this story and the way that Andy reveals it, to recognize that human element in everyone around us, like in every house, in everybody that we pass at Pick and Pay, and everybody that's at the Howard Center or wherever else in Cape Town. Like, behind that person is a scared heart, or somebody that's concerned, or somebody that's maybe affected or dealing with stress or whatever. And so even though we can't touch them or anything, like, we can definitely just have a prayerful attitude towards those people. Outside of that, we could get really long sticks with baskets, and we could put things through the gate. Yeah. And drop a South Point church invites to them. Yeah. Just turn the basket over.
Yeah. Yeah. I think with so many things up in the air, and for me specifically with my job, I'm not sure when I'm going to go back to work. And I'm not the only person in South Africa in that situation. There are thousands of people that their livelihoods are in the balance now. And they need good news. And I think as Christians, we have the good news they need to hear. And in moments where you see someone struggling or they express to you that they're fearful, we have that opportunity to share our good news with them. You don't have to preach to them for 45 minutes. You can just say, hey, how can I pray for you? Hey, Jesus loves you. And I think that's how we can serve the people around us as best we can.
I think one of the things that is great about technology nowadays is we're so connected. And I think that it's the opportunity we have is to actually be really intentional about pursuing connectiveness with people. Because it's so easy to sit at home now in isolation. That is, I'm just going to stay with my family and watch Netflix all the time. Like, that's all I'm going to do, right? But it's calling us to be showing love to other people through actually connecting with them, and that's phoning them and sending them a line and say, hey, do you need any help? Like, I had a story this week. Someone is phoning some of our elderly friends and saying, can I go shopping for you? Like, that's a great thing. I mean, some of them aren't even allowed out of the house, like, because of the health risks that they face. So. The other thing I'm thinking a lot about is like local businesses. Like, people aren't showing up to work. That's fine. You can still work from home, but productivity, like what's happening there? Like restaurants. I mean, you can't now go out after 6 o'clock. Like, that's surely going to have a huge impact on things. I'm kind of like, every time I drive past a coffee shop, I just want to go buy a cup of coffee just to stay in business, because you've got to support them somehow. So. I think all of us can show love somehow. We just got to be able to be really intentional about picking what we can do and what we can't do, and showing that around us. Thanks for joining us for the conversation. Thank you as well for sitting along, and I hope that you've enjoyed our conversation. We're going to try to do this every week, and hopefully it's a little bit interesting to you, and that you can at least enjoy it along the way. One of the things we'd love for you to do is invite someone to come and share our online experience on a Sunday morning. We stream live at 8:30 and 10 o'clock. You can do that at live.southpointchurch.co.za. And if you want some information about what's happening around here, southpoint.site is a great place to head on over to be able to catch up on a little bit more here. Otherwise, we'd love for you to share this online, share this with your friends. We'd love to keep the conversation going, so comment down below. Thanks for being here, and we will see you online on Sunday. Not in person, but online.